Well, welcome back to Imaginary Lines, everyone. This is episode 14. My name is Keith Giles, and I'm joined by my friend and poet, Darrell Epp. Say hi, Darrell.
Hello, good evening. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Although technically this will come out the day after Halloween,
Oh,
but
wow.
I'm sure you have still have the candy, and you probably still have your decorations up. Um, so all that, right? It's fresh in your mind. And so right there, on the Halloween season, squeaking in, we wanted to do a Halloween themed episode. And Darrell's idea was that we would kind of each cover our favorite horror films. Um, Darrell has a much longer list than mine. I'm not a huge horror fan personally, but there's a handful of films that I think sort of fit that category, technically, that I could share. But Darrell, since this was your idea, you've got a great long list. I'll let you kick it off.
Okay, great. So, in honor of Halloween, we're talking about scary movies. My number one, in the number one spot, my favorite scary movie, it's a tie between two movies. So, before I get to the tie later on, I'm going to see how much of my list I can get through. So basically, these aren't ranked exactly, except for the tie for number one.
Okay.
So from here on, it's just horror movies I recommend.
Okay.
And the first movie is called Oni Baba, which is directed by Kaneto Shindo, Kaneto Shindo directed almost 50 movies and wrote the screenplay for over 100 movies. And Oni Baba is, in Japanese, it means devil woman or demon hag. And this movie actually features two of them. It's a movie that takes place during the Japanese Civil War in the 1300s. And there's a woman and her mother-in-law who live in really squalid conditions that most people have throughout history. And to make ends meet, they sort of wait for wandering dudes to walk by so they can seduce them into falling into a giant pit they built. And once they're dead in the pit, they strip their clothing and sell them in exchange for some rice. So it's a real it's kind of grim, and then eventually, yeah. But that's not the scary part. That comes later. And this movie takes place in an area by a river with really thick kind of grass that's always kind of undulating in the wind. That's really interesting. And at one point, a guy shows up who had went away to war with the woman's son, and now he's back. And basically, he's back because he deserted the battlefront, and the woman's son and the other woman's husband is not back. So then eventually, over time, the woman whose son is at war starts getting randy and goes off to have regular rendezvous with this dude. And then her mother-in-law thinks, wait a minute, if they start hitting it off, I'll be left alone and I won't be able to kill people on my own. I need this woman's help. And then another samurai comes along who has a scary mask stuck to his face. She kills him and then puts the mask on when her daughter-in-law is going out for her sexual rendezvous with this dude, and jumps up and scares her so that her daughter-in-law thinks it's a demon. So she runs back home, and this is her plan to stop her from running off to have these dangerous liaisons with this dude so she can keep her thing going. And then eventually, it works pretty well for a long time. And then eventually she finds she can't get the mask off. And when the mask is finally ripped off, she's kind of disfigured under the mask. And now the daughter is really freaked out, thinking, oh, I thought you were a demon, then I thought you were my mother-in-law wearing a mask, but now I think you're really a demon. And then the woman says, I'm a human being, as she approaches the hole that they've been using to entice dudes to their death. And it's just a great movie. And
I've never seen that one.
it's really good. And the scar she has on the face from the mask, they actually resemble radiation burns from Hiroshima. And it's kind of funny. This movie came out the same year as Doctor Strangelove. And in Doctor Strangelove, they had this idea that was trendy then, that perverted or frustrated sexual desire, like General Jack D. Ripper with his concerns about fluoride in the water, will lead to Armageddon. And in Japan, Armageddon had already happened.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of interesting how in North America there are people who get rich from scaring people with the end of the world or the tribulation, when in other parts, when it's very gauche and crass, because other parts of the world has already ended. They've already had tribulation. So Onibaba is just a great movie. So
Yeah.
that's one recommendation that I recommend
Awesome.
to you.
All right.
Yeah. Next up is The Brood by David Cronenberg.
Oh, thank you. David Cronenberg. Love him.
Yeah. Really interesting body of work, obviously. I always thought his first movie called Shivers, I thought was his best. But The Brood has a lot going on. Basically, what happened with The Brood was he made Shivers, then he made Rabid, and then he went through a really messy divorce, and then Kramer versus Kramer came out with Dustin Hoffman, which was a movie really trying hard to get an Oscar and make you cry about a divorce. And David Cronenberg's like, I just got divorced. It's not like that. And he just thought Kramer versus Kramer was so phony and false. And so The Brood is like his version of Kramer versus Kramer.
But it's a horror film.
Yeah. And it has some really raw, painful dialogue written by someone who had just got divorced. And it's just a great movie. I'm not sure if you've seen it or what we can say about it. It's great.
No, I have not seen it.
Okay.
I have seen, I would say, the mistake of going back to watch Scanners because I'd never seen it. But I'd always seen this head exploding and I knew the basic plot of the film. And I was like, I can't believe I've never seen that movie. And I like his other films. So I rented it and wow, I really, really do not recommend that film. I would just say
Really?
it hasn't aged well. Maybe it was great in the 70s, but it is not so great today.
What was it you didn't like about it?
All of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I just it's one of these things where like the plot is interesting. The acting, oh, that's what it was. The actor that plays the main guy, who is sort of he's like the main character in the film. Gosh, he is a horrible actor. He is horrible, like worse than a soap opera actor. I think that was his first movie and his last, and that is justice because that guy was awful. I don't know where they found him, but he was terrible. Every other minor character in the film who has a scene with him is instantly a better actor. It's just so obvious what a bad actor he is. But anyway, there's a lot of things I did not like about that movie.
Wow, that's wild. Yeah, that actor is Stephen Lack, who was from Montreal, and now he lives in the States, and he's at quite a career as a painter, as a fine artist.
Good. I'm good. I'm glad he
Yeah.
found something he could do well.
Oh wow, wow. Yeah. Maybe I'm biased and I like it because the main character's name is Darrell, but I really like it a lot. I just like the idea about how it's kind of a Philip K. Dick idea about if you were actually telepathic, how different would that play out in your day-to-day life compared to schizophrenia?
Hmm.
And so basically, Darrell in the movie,
He's a homeless guy. Yeah.
well, Darrell is his brother, uh, played by Michael Ironside,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
and yeah, and so basically, the two brothers can't control the voices in their head,
Right.
and so basically, Darrell gets like a drill and drills a hole in his forehead where his third eye would be
Right.
and that's how he's able to control the voices at some point. So, uh,
Yeah. I mean,
no,
I like the bits of the. I mean, it's one of these things where if I think if you took that script and reshot it with better actors today and better special effects, because the special effects are pretty cheesy. I mean, I laughed out loud at the parts that are supposed to be so like cool and dramatic, like people exploding. Because to me, they're just it was comical. It wasn't like, whoa. It was like, really? So anyway, it just didn't do it for me, man. Sorry.
wow, you're uh, wow, I'm almost speechless. This is wild. I've never
Anyway,
heard this
sorry.
before.
Go finish your list. I hope that one wasn't on your list.
No, no, that's cool. Yeah, it's 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 kind of funny. Um, Michael Ironside, who played Darrell Revick, he once said, "I've worked with over 100 directors, and only two of them knew what they were doing."
And one was David
And
Cronenberg.
yeah, one was David Cronenberg, and the other was Paul Verhoeven in Starship Troopers.
Oh yeah. Oh, I
And
love that movie.
oh, okay, okay.
We'll talk about that
And
down. When we cover science fiction eventually, I'll tell you why I love
yeah,
that movie so much.
yeah, and
That
it's
one and
kind of funny
RoboCop.
because
RoboCop and Starship Troopers are both Verhoeven
yeah,
masterpieces.
well, he has a movie called The Fourth Man, and that was the last movie he made before he left Holland and went to America. And that's a movie that I really love. And I saw it on a big screen when I was 19. Maybe that was part of it. But The Fourth Man, I really enjoyed that movie a whole lot. And he's a really smart guy, and it's just great. Um, so it's funny. At the end of Scanners, there's a bit where Darrell Revick says, "I'm going to suck your brain dry. Brother should be close, don't you think?" Right? And
Yeah.
then when I went to see Starship Troopers, it was so funny because we're in the theater, and maybe this is like a patriotism thing. We're like, David Cronenberg's from Toronto, so we're Canadian, so we have to love him or something, right? So then we're all in the theater, and then these insects kill a bunch of dudes, and then the camera zooms in on Michael Ironside's face as he turns around. So his face is huge in the frame. And then the first thing Michael Ironside says in Starship Troopers, he says, "It sucked his brain dry." And then everyone in the theater just started laughing, going, "Yeah, this guy's a Scanners fan," right?
Oh yeah.
So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and Scanners was sort of it's only David Cronenberg movie with car chases until he made the movie Crash, which had different sorts of car
Oh
chases.
yeah. Well, very different.
Yeah. So basically, uh, The Brood is very Cronenberg, where a guy's wife is sort of involved with a doctor, played by Oliver Reed, who's kind of a bit of a crackpot, who is trying to cure her mental illness in a new way, where your thoughts become physical so that they can be physically cut out. But it goes horribly awry, as things tend to in horror movies, and her rage becomes expressed in these like killer dwarves that go out and kill. And it's always nice seeing Oliver Reed in a movie. His last movie was Gladiator with Ridley Scott, and when they were filming The Brood in Toronto, he ran down Yonge Street during a blizzard, stark naked, because someone dared him to, because that's what Oliver Reed does.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So Oliver Reed was about, like, he was kind of like the Keith Moon of actors, where he just really thought life should be lived, pedal to the metal. And
Mm-hmm.
that's great. So for the next spot, there's a 3-pack of horror movies by a great director I've loved since I was a kid, James Whale. In 1931, he made a movie called Frankenstein with Boris Karloff, which obviously is great. Then he made, in 33, he made The Invisible Man with Claude Rains, which is also great. And one thing that's wild about The Invisible Man is it's got some really funny bits. And The Invisible Man, he really gets a sadistic gleefulness out of doing his dastardly deeds while he's invisible. Like, he appears in a train, takes control of the train, makes a train crash, and he's just giggling the whole time. And there's something really off about seeing a horror movie villain do bad things while he's giggling.
Yeah.
And that was great. And then after that, Claude Rains was in Casablanca, where he was the guy who said, I'm shocked," to
Yes.
find out that there's,
Yeah. I love Casablanca. Great movie.
Yeah. And Claude Rains is just so great. And then in 1935, James Whale made The Bride of Frankenstein. And so he was quite on the roll there. That's 3 by James Whale. And those movies have Dwight Fry in them, who was also in Bela Lugosi's Dracula. And Alice Cooper has a great song called "The Ballad of Dwight Fry," because when Alice Cooper was young, he's like, wait a minute, the scariest thing in a horror movie isn't the monster. The scariest thing is always Dwight Fry, where he played Renfield in Dracula. Yeah, that's him. Where he goes to Dracula to sell him some real estate, which doesn't work out very well. And then when Dracula's ship arrives in England, they find him insane on the bottom of the ship, just giggling with his hair out of place. And it's really upsetting. And in Dracula and in Frankenstein, he played Fritz, who stole the wrong brain, which is why Frankenstein didn't have a good start in life there.
That same scene is in Young Frankenstein as well, where they got the Abby normal brain.
Yeah. And so basically, like in the movie Frankenstein, Dwight Fry breaks in to the lecture hall at the local university, where they have a table full of brains just hanging out. And then he grabs one, and then an owl hoots and scares him, and he drops the brain. So then he feels bad, so he picks up one that says abnormal brain, and he's like, oh, geez, I hope the boss isn't picky. And then it just goes downhill from there. And then Dwight Fry was in The Invisible Man as well. And so in terms of horror, You should also check out the song "The Ballad of Dwight Fry" by Alice Cooper,
Cool.
which is excellent. Also, another movie that's important is The Wolf Man with Lon Chaney Jr. Lon Chaney Jr. kind of had a flat monotone voice, but he was really good at crying, and he insisted on any movie he did, he wanted to cry. So he cried in like Of Mice and Men, The Wolf Man. Um, he was great in High Noon. The Wolf Man is a beautiful, spooky, great movie. Do you want to jump in here for a minute and do a few of yours?
Yeah, I can. I can drop in a couple. So as you were talking, more things are coming to my mind. So I started off with only 4 films, but then now I've added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've added 5. So
Right on.
I'm getting close to 10. So what should I start with? Oh, well, I guess I will say these are not any order, but there's a movie that I saw as a young kid on television that really scared the crap out of me more than, and actually I've even seen recently, I've seen people writing articles about how this is the scariest film they've ever seen, and they still have nightmares about it. So this is a film, it stars Karen Black. It was actually made for television in 1975. It's called Trilogy of Terror. I don't know why it's called trilogy, because it's not a trilogy, it's one film, but it's called Trilogy of Terror. And I don't know much about the story, but if you've ever seen a scene from it, I mean, really all it would take is for you to see this particular scene. This woman, I think, is given some kind of a tiki doll or some kind of like voodoo kind of something dolls from some travels. And I don't remember how she gets a hold of it, but anyway, it's in her house and this thing comes alive. And so it's only about 6 inches tall. And it's got like a little shield and a sword or something, or a knife. I don't know. It's got some kind of weapon. It's got this really weird face, and it freaking runs through the house chasing her, trying to kill her, right? And she is running, screaming, hiding in the doors, and she opens the door and she can't see it. And then it chases her again. And that was one of the creepiest, freakiest things I've ever seen. And I think because I saw it as a young kid, wow, that scared the crap out of me. So that one's a great one. I don't know if it's on DVD or not. It's probably been released at some point. You can probably check it out.
Well, first off, it's called Trilogy of Terror because that movie contains 3 stories.
Oh, there you go. See, I all I remember is that one story.
Yeah, so it's a movie, and they did this, and they did a few British horror movies with Peter Cushing as well in the '60s that were like this, where you go to see a movie, it was 3 half-hour stories basically.
Mm-hmm.
And in that story you're talking about, that woman is Karen Black.
Yeah, Karen Black.
And just before this, she had been in a fantastic movie called 5 Easy Pieces with Jack Nicholson,
Mm-hmm.
which is a movie that I have a lot of affection for. And Karen Black was really good looking, but more than that, she was weird looking, which is even better, where she had really big eyes, kind of like Meg Foster was another actress who was attractive. She was in the TV show V. She was in the Osterman Weekend. You'd recognize her if you saw her, Meg Foster. So she was a good-looking woman, but her eyes were so blue. It was really spooky.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting, right?
Yeah.
And the funny thing about Trilogy of Terror, there's a good reason why it's so memorable for you, is because it's by Richard Matheson.
Well, yeah. There you go.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense.
When it comes to horror, Richard Matheson is kind of the go-to guy, where Stephen King has said that Richard Matheson is the writer who influenced him the most.
Yeah.
Who he was always shooting for. So Richard Matheson wrote the best episodes of The Twilight Zone.
Yep.
He wrote I Am Legend, which was made into The Omega Man.
And sort of made into I Am Legend, which was the one with Will Smith.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, which I like that. I like that version a lot.
Yeah, that movie has been made in that book has been made into a movie at least 3 times.
Right.
In the early 60s, they made a version of I Am Legend starring Vincent Price called The Last Man on Earth.
Yeah.
And it's a fantastic movie because at the start of it, there's a big section where it just shows him making his rounds, doing his thing, burning the corpses, and it just really drives home his loneliness, and it's really powerful. It's really great.
Yeah.
And Richard Matheson wrote The Incredible Shrinking Man, Somewhere in Time, What Dreams May Come, which was made to me with Robin Williams.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and he wrote the Legend of Hell House, which was made into a movie with Roddy McDowall.
Yeah. I love Roddy McDowall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So let me go down my list here a little bit more. So that's what I remembered as you were talking. But so the ones that were on the list that I kind of came to the table with, and again, I think a lot of my choices are. I mean, these are the ones I own these DVDs, so like I must really like them because I went and bought them. I don't own any other films I think that would qualify, quote unquote, as horror films. But to me, they're probably more like sci-fi horror because I'm really more into science fiction. But I really love John Carpenter's The Thing with Kurt Russell. I love that movie. I really do. I think I remember seeing it in the theater. Well, I think one of the I mean, I love the way they handled it. I think it's I think one of the critiques John Carpenter said was, he, as a young boy, he saw the original one with James Arness, 1956,
Yeah.
whatever. And he said, he loved the movie up until they revealed the creature, because they kept talking about this creature and you didn't really get to see it. We talked before about Jaws, like not seeing the shark.
Mhm.
And he said, but when they finally revealed the creature, he goes, oh, it's a guy in a rubber suit. And so when
Yeah.
he went to make the remake of the film, he was determined when you saw the creature, it wasn't going to be a guy in a rubber suit. In fact, half the time the thing looks exactly like your friend, your coworker, because it mimics, biology and stuff. And so one of my favorite scenes in that film is when they realize kind of what's going on. They realize there's this creature and it's taking their forms because they're finding the bodies of people and and realizing, oh, these people it's not really my friend. This is this creature. So they sort of like duct tape, tie all these guys down to the chair in the office, and they take blood samples from all of them. And then one by one, they take they superheat like a copper wire with a flamethrower, and then they stick it in the blood. And if they stick it in the blood, nothing happens. Okay, cut him loose. He's good. And then they go to the next guy. And of course, if it's like the second or third guy, they do it, and the blood like leaps and jumps and reacts. And then the guy in the chair starts, morphing and changing. And of course, the people tied next to him are like, dude, cut me out of here. Like, I'm tied up next to this guy. So it's really cool. I just really like the way they do it. By introducing that sort of element, there's an element of paranoia and, who do you trust? And it kind of also, gets into the Philip K. Dick kind of themes of who's human and how do you know and all that stuff. So yeah, I like that movie a lot. I like The Thing. Love Kurt Russell. I think the same year The Thing came out, Blade Runner came out, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it was the same year Kurt Russell had another film that came out that I also really love, called Big Trouble in Little China. It's not a horror; it's more of a comedy, action comedy.
Yeah.
So then my other one on my list is Ridley Scott's Alien. And I would pick that one because I know it's a science fiction, but Ridley Scott, sort of his vision for the film. I think I had read an interview with him or saw an interview with him, and he said that he had watched. Someone had told him he needed to watch the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and he said normally he wouldn't watch films like that, but he said watching it, he was really in awe of the way the director had directed the film, and the horror elements of it, the dread and the anticipation, and when is this guy going to come after you, and all this kind of stuff. And so he was intrigued to make a science fiction film that kind of used some of those same little elements that he liked in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which by the way, I've never seen. But so I think in that sense, Alien is definitely something inspired by like a true horror film. That's what Ridley Scott was going for. And I think he does a wonderful job of it. It's just to me, Alien is just such a fantastic film. I think it's way better than any of the remakes. I think if you watch, and I've done this, if you watch Alien side by side with the sequel, Aliens, Alien, the first film by Ridley Scott, made in 79, is a movie that I promise you 20 years from now, people are going to be saying to their kids, "You've got to see this movie." I really don't think they're going to be saying that about Aliens, James Cameron's version, unless they do an update to it. Because honestly, the special effects have not aged well at all in Aliens. The practical effects are good, like the suit and the queen, alien queen, all that stuff are good. The sort of tank, sort of truck thing they're driving in, that's cool. But the blue screen stuff, the stuff in space and the other stuff, it's really bad. It's not aged well at all. Whereas Alien, again, an older film, it's all practical effects. It looks real. It looks like you could walk into that ship and it's a real working ship. Everything about it to me is perfect. Like he did a wonderful job on the sets, the special effects, the creature, everything about it, I think is perfect. Love that movie. Any thoughts on either one of those?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I've seen those movies, and it was only recently that I actually heard some people say they preferred Aliens to Alien, and I was really shocked. Like I said, wow, these people exist. Okay, you know. But I've heard a lot of people go in depth about all this hidden meaning to Aliens, about how James Cameron was tapping into these Greek myths and all this stuff,
Oh,
jibber
no, he's
jabber,
not.
and the idea about how at the start of Aliens, the Alien starts with her processing the loss of her family, and then by the end of the movie, she's got a new surrogate family, and people think that's really interesting or something.
To me, when I look at Aliens, and again, I've done this. I watched Alien, the first one, then I watched the second one, Aliens, the sequel, like either the same day or the next day. So back to back, basically, I watched both films, and I could see, compare them. And the other thing I think Aliens, the sequel, does poorly is the story. Honestly, to me, all they did was take the first movie and they added more aliens and they added more machine guns. It's pretty much the same thing. At the end, instead of fighting the one alien, she's fighting the big queen alien. Instead of one alien in the ship, there's 100. Yay, we get to shoot a bunch of aliens. It's to me, it's not that. I mean, I enjoy it. I don't want to dump on it. I do think I enjoyed the film. I like the element where there's the corporate guy that betrays them, and I think that's really good. And I like Newt as a character. I think she's really great. I love the whole, game over, man. We'll put her in charge. I mean, I love that. All that stuff is great. It's entertaining, but to me, that's what it is. I mean, this is kind of getting into something. I don't know what you think about this, but maybe I'm a film snob. But there are some things that I put into the category of film, and some things I put into the category of movie. A movie is just entertaining, popcorn, turn off your brain, enjoy it, have a great time. Wow, that was exciting. That made me laugh. That was a thrill. And I go home. And actually, usually those kinds of movies, I enjoy them in the moment, but then after I think about them a while, I go, oh, you know what? That was dumb. Actually, you know what? That didn't make sense. But they're just kind of like, it's entertainment, purely entertainment. Whereas to me, a film, and I would put Ridley Scott's Alien, in the category of a film. I think it has more staying power. I think there's way more layers and depths going on to that film than there is in Aliens, or just things like that. So again, maybe it's subjective. I definitely have films I would put into the film category, and others I would put into the movie category. And it's not that I don't like movies. I love movies, but to me, movies, they're just going after something a little bit different, I guess. And I guess what I'm saying is there's less art to a movie than there is to something like what I would call a film.
Yeah, I would probably guess that I'm more of a film snob than you are. Like, I gather you've watched movies about superheroes, so right there, that's kind of a bridge too far for me.
Really?
So
No, you're right.
yeah,
I am a huge Marvel geek. I am so giddy. I will watch every Marvel film that comes out and love them. I am in awe of how Marvel,
yeah,
over a 10-year span, basically linked together all these different films, individual solo films, culminating in the Avengers films that
right.
wrapped it all up in Endgame and perfectly did it. I mean, it was like, forget Lord of the Rings, man. I mean, Lord of the Rings is
Right.
awesome, but that was only 3 films, like 6-8 hours in length. This is like 10 films, all linked together, all culminating in a single story, and they just nailed it. I love it. So yes,
Yeah,
I unashamedly love Marvel films.
yeah. So imagine explaining a passionate romance to a sociopath, right? So that's what this is like. So like I sit here and when someone says millions of adults watch movies about superheroes, I'm like, I know what each one of those words mean, but I can't put that together and make sense of it.
So
I
explain to
just
me. I know you got. Here's what you need to explain to me, Darrell. I
yeah,
know you love comics. I know you are a
yeah.
huge superhero fan. So why are you against watching a movie about a superhero? How is that any different than loving stories about superheroes that are printed on a page versus appreciating stories about superheroes that are acted out on a screen?
Okay. See again, imagine explaining passionate romance to a sociopath. That feels like the bridge here because you asked a question, but then you just answered it. Um, uh, you said, "What's the difference between a superhero story on a page and a movie?" And like, well, that's the answer. Like, if there's a superhero story that I like by John Broome or Gardner Fox, everything that I like about it is on the page,
Right.
and there's
But
nothing that
but
I like about it that's on the screen.
right. And but you could still like those, and I do. I love comics. I love comic stories on the page, but there are comic stories that are on the film in film that I love. I love both. I don't know why can't I love both?
Um,
What's missing when you have someone acted out in live action?
um, Everything I like about them, for one thing. Um, uh, um, like I've said before, uh, when I say comics, um, I guess the majority of the time when I read comics in my house, they're not comics about superheroes. Um, uh, uh, so that's one thing, and I don't like perpetuating the idea to the public that comics equal superheroes.
Right.
Um,
No, I agree with you
and
on that. I do. But we are
yeah,
talking about, I'm asking specifically about superhero films.
okay. When I read a superhero comic, I like one that I like by say like Dick Sprang or Carmine Infantino. Um, I find them inspiring in what I would like the the sensations I'd like to evoke in my own writing, where I think they sort of have this fairy tale, internal dream logic quality to them, and I like it. And uh, superhero movies seem really creepy, and I think they're harmful. Um,
Wow. Okay. Why are they harmful?
um, I mean, that guy who plays Iron Man, he just strikes me as being really repulsive. But then it seems like
I
people
love
like
Robert
him.
Downey Jr. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Um, See, and I'm just sitting here thinking he's repulsive. How do people not?
What's
So,
repulsive about him? So you think he as a person, not just in the film, but Robert Downey Jr., the human being, is repulsive.
well, I think more of the character, I guess. Um,
But isn't he
I've
supposed
just
to be
watched this.
repulsive? I mean, in the comics, Tony Stark, at least in the beginning, he's a millionaire playboy. He's a womanizer. He's a drunk. He's an alcoholic. I mean, he has a huge ego. So I think that's what they're trying to show you is this is how he starts out, and but there is character development where he sort of outgrows all those things.
Yeah, I just don't get why you would like. It seems like in a superhero movie, like people cheer for the good guys because they're like. It just seems like, how do you know they're good? They're good because they're rich and famous, and they're rich and famous because they're like it. Like it seems like they're good because they win. They win because they're good. They're they're rich and attractive, and therefore and
Have you seen a superhero movie recently? Because I feel like you haven't. Because I could point out to you like in Iron Man specifically. I would say Tony Stark is good because in the beginning he's not. He's an asshole, and he's insensitive and he's selfish and self-centered. But he nearly dies from one of his own weapons. He's held captive in a cave. This Middle Eastern man, who he doesn't even remember, but he's met him before at a symposium years ago, because he didn't even have time to give the guy the time of day. But that guy remembers him, and he's also a scientist. And this guy like risks his life to save Tony. And so when Tony comes back to gets out of the cave, builds the armor, comes back to the States, he's like, you know what? I'm done. No more weapons. I'm not making weapons anymore. I'm turning my company around. We're gonna make things that help people. And so that's why he's good. I mean, right off the bat, in the first half hour of the film, Tony Stark is good because he became good. He starts off as a jerk. He has this incredible, journey. And now he's become somebody who says, you know what? I don't want to be this person anymore. I want to be a better person. And I'm even willing to burn down my father's legacy, this company that makes me billions of dollars and puts me on the cover of Forbes magazine. I'm ready to burn it all down because I think this is wrong. I would say that's what makes Iron Man and Tony Stark a hero.
yeah, I think I saw an Iron Man movie with Ben Kingsley in it, and I remember comic book people felt bad that he played the Mandarin, and it turned out there was some switcheroo there or something, which I didn't.
Yeah, that was Iron Man 3, and that was the worst Iron Man of all the Iron Man movies. That was
Really?
horrible. I actually
Um,
pretended it didn't happen because it was so bad.
yeah, yeah. One thing I'm curious about too, like how you're not allowed to laugh at Bill Cosby anymore because we know things about him that we didn't know back in the 80s, right?
Right.
And I don't get why that doesn't apply to superhero stories, because as opposed to when we were young, now we know all these facts about how superheroes were created. Um, so I don't know why the Bill Cosby rule wouldn't apply, right? Like uh, before Iron Man, Jack Kirby was writing Green Arrow, and there's a Green Arrow story, um, which is exactly Iron Man's origin, where he's trapped in a cave by communists, and he makes this weapon in this cave and all this stuff. And then a couple years later, he took that story and redid it for Iron Man,
Mm-hmm.
and then he was robbed of credit for it. And then uh, the Fantastic Four was him redoing a comic he had done earlier called The Challengers of the Unknown.
Right.
And half of the team is named after his family members.
Yeah.
Ben Grimm is named after his father, and Sue Storm is named after his daughter, and that was stolen from him. So I just don't get why the Bill Cosby thing wouldn't apply there. But it just seems like that whole superhero cult is just so ethically compromised.
Mhm.
And I mean, Steve Ditko fortunately had ethics and didn't care about money, but he lived in a rent-controlled apartment, so his rent never went up. But
Right.
There's a new Spider-Man movie coming out, and they have Spider-Man bath towels at Walmart,
Right.
and it's like, wouldn't you look at that and go, "Wow, this is about theft," you know, like Iron Man is about theft,
Hmm.
right? Spider-Man's about theft.
Yeah.
So it's like, Bill Cosby isn't on reruns anymore because we know these things, right? So I just don't know why that doesn't apply in this case. But
So
you know,
you wouldn't read the comics either?
the comics, meaning like Marvel
Uh,
comics from the
Yeah.
60s.
Yeah.
No, it just hurts to it just hurts. It's like Jack Kirby said that was the worst decade of his life.
Mhm.
It caused him and his wife a lot of pain.
Yeah.
Um, uh, it seems strange when like he wrote comics in the 40s, 50s, and 70s that are the best comics ever. So I don't know why you'd want to get his work and have it sabotaged and have like a diluted, watered down version of it.
Hmm.
Like in the 1950s, he wrote a comic book called Mother Delilah, which is one of the best comic books ever written. And after he left Marvel, he wrote the best comics ever: Etrigan, OMAC, Forever People, New Gods, uh, Mr. Miracle. And I don't know why anyone would want to, you know, read a Marvel comic from the 60s.
Hmm.
But yeah.
Anyway, it's Halloween, so let's finish our
Okay,
horror film list.
so where we were, you mentioned The Thing, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Also, that kind of ties into Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Thank you. It's on my list too, by the way. Yes.
Really?
Yes, I love that one.
In Okay, it's
Which version though? Which version?
see that's a funny question. Um, it has been made into a movie at least 3 times,
Right.
and each version is worth seeing.
Really?
They made a version in the 90s, directed by Abel Ferreira, just after he made Bad Lieutenant, and the performance by Meg Tilly in that movie makes it worth seeing. It's
Oh,
awesome.
all right. I've never
Yeah.
seen that one. To me, the 78 version with Donald Sutherland and Leonard Nimoy, Jeff Goldblum, and Brooke Adams, that's the best.
It's funny. I've just recently come around to that. And the original version is by Don Siegel, who directed Dirty Harry and was a huge influence on Clint Eastwood, the director Eastwood, you
Yes.
know. Um, and Don Siegel was a really great, tough, lean, mean director. It was great. And the black and white version is just fantastic, and I love it.
Hmm.
And that's really my bag. And then uh, the 70s version, first off, Donald Sutherland appears on our list later on in this episode.
Okay.
And if you actually look at it, Donald Sutherland in the 70s had the most amazing decade.
Yeah.
If you look at what he did, um, he was in the movie that's #1 on my list.
Ooh.
Yeah, he was in Casanova by Federico Fellini. He was in Clute with Jane Fonda. He was in
Yep.
this movie. He was in MASH. Uh, I mean, like Kelly's Heroes, all that stuff. It's
Hmm.
really amazing.
Yep.
So, so of course the 70s version has the famous ending,
Yes, I
but
love that scene.
yeah. But what you also notice is that by the time, if you watch the movie, as time goes by in the movie, the ambient background noise of life gets muted and muted and muted until the end, right? So it's like, you know how like right now there's like, my furnace, there's wind, there's crickets, there's birds, right? And by the time you get to the big payoff at the end, that's all gone.
Right.
So, and this happens on a non-conscious level until some film nerd points it out to you, right? But it's just part of the ride until you really get to this primal fear stage. And by bleaching out all the background noise, you're like, so what? Do they have pods for the crickets too?
Right. They've taken over all life. I think in that movie they do suggest that, because don't you see animals? There's a dog that has a man's head.
Oh man.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So animals are all life is being assimilated.
Wow. And one thing, of course, they have better special effects in the 70s than in the 50s. So there's a great moment where Donald Sutherland is hugging Brooke Adams just as she's changing. And that is actually really upsetting.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's a great one. I love that movie.
Primo,
and it really
right
did. It scared the crap out of me as a kid. What that final scene was like, oh, geez.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was so good. So I'll share one more that's maybe a little obscure. I got a couple of obscure ones in here also. So there's a movie from 1967 starring Audrey Hepburn, Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., and Alan Arkin. And I had to look it up. I couldn't remember the name of it, but I do remember seeing this as a young kid. And it's called Wait Until Dark. And the storyline is, it's a black and white film. The storyline is Audrey Hepburn is she's blind, and she's living in her apartment, but there's like a guy who like gets into her apartment, and he's silently moving through the apartment. And at first she doesn't know he's there. And so you see, oh my gosh, this guy's like right there. And what's he going to do? But she's oblivious, right? And then at some point she senses that he's there. She goes, I know someone's here. And who are you? And what do you want? And then he's like, she runs to the door. He locks the door. She goes to the phone. He pulls the cord, and so you have it's this wonderful little setup where you see everything, but she can't. And I think the storyline is, I think the reason why he's in her apartment is they're like drug dealers, and there's some doll that she has that's filled with heroin or something, like $1 million worth of heroin or something, and she doesn't know that. And but they're trying to find it without her, knowing that they're there. But of course that falls apart, and then she does know they're there, but then she's trying to kill the guy and get out of there and stuff. It's just really well done. It's a very, very well directed film. The creep factor, you'd have to watch it because it definitely puts you on edge. Makes you feel like, oh, what would it be like if you were blind and you couldn't see anything? Yeah, it's just really good. I like that movie a lot.
Cool. So is it fair to say you're more of a science fiction guy than a horror guy?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes. Hands down. Even my sci-fi choices are really more, even my horror choices are really still more science fiction. So I'll give you one more, and then this one is a recent film. And speaking of Cronenberg, this is directed by his son, Brandon Cronenberg. This is the DVD. It's called Possessor. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I really, really love this film. Way more the science fiction element of it, but the science fiction element of it is there's basically this technology where, and it's kind of an alternate reality thing. You don't really catch that. I mean, I didn't when I watched it, but then I saw an interview with Brandon Cronenberg, and he points out how there's little clues as you're watching it that this is not our world. This is not the world we live in, but it looks like the world we live in. But there's some kind of technology where this company has developed this technology, and they use it for nefarious, ends, where they can basically sort of project one person's mind into another person's body and control them and behave as them. And then basically what they do is like they assassinate people for a lot of money, large corporate interests who have millions or billions of dollars to say, I want you to pose as this person, have this person murder somebody and then kill themselves, and then there'll be a huge scandal and our stocks will go up or whatever. So but the story, so that's sort of the the setup of what's going on, the kind of the MacGuffin, like the cool thing, the cool technology. But the real horror of the thing is the woman who is sort of their star assassin, who she's done this so many times, but she's gone in and out of other people's minds and bodies so many times. She's losing her own identity. Even when she's in her own body, she has flashes of the other person's memories. And she's trying to hide it from her employers. They give her these psychological evaluations every time she comes out, and to test her to, they have like a box of objects, for example, and some of them are her personal items and some are just random nothing items. And she has to pull each one out and say, this is mine, or I've never seen this before. And it's trying to get her back in her own head. But even though they do these evaluations for her, she's seeing weird things that are happening that shouldn't be there, flashes of things that are kind of coming in and out of her mind. Anyway, she's slowly basically losing her mind, but not telling anybody about it. And but she's still going on these missions. Anyway, it's just a really it's so well done. Brandon Cronenberg, this is only his second film. I haven't seen his first one yet. I need to go back and watch that one. I think his first one's called Viral. But this one, Possessor, is just phenomenal. Very well done, very well acted, really very well shot. I will warn you, it's extremely violent. It's extremely bloody, especially if you watch as I did, if you watch the unedited version. It's pretty brutal, but it's also extremely well done. So I really like that movie.
That's cool. I haven't seen that yet. I've heard good things about it. Sometime I'd like to do an episode on horror movies I hate.
There you go.
And
that'd be fun.
And yeah, because you don't like horror movies because so many horror movies, to make the plot happen, the character has to do something stupid, like run towards the haunted house, all these things.
Or let's split up. Let's split up.
Yeah,
yes. Let's not stay together. Yeah.
Yeah. So I recently saw a movie called The Lodge, which was made about 2 years ago.
Oh, you know what? How was that? Because I was curious about that film. No, didn't like it.
Well, it's kind of funny. I want to do an episode on this movie.
Okay, good. Let's do it. So save it.
Yeah.
Save it. I would also say, You just reminded me too, there's another recent film. There was a horror film that I did like. And maybe it's called It Follows.
I saw that. Okay, we can do that.
Yeah. Did you like that one?
Should I save it for the review?
Well, I guess I'll find, if you didn't like it, then yes, we'll save it for the horror films we didn't like.
Okay, cool.
You didn't like it?
I guess not. No.
Yeah. What I liked about it was, again, I'm not a horror film, critic, so I don't watch a lot of them. So I'm not probably qualified to say what is or isn't a good horror film. But what I liked about it, I think it did a wonderful job of creating a sense of paranoia. Like one of my favorite scenes is there's a character in broad daylight. They're in a park and she's with her friends sitting in a circle on the grass, and she's trying to explain to them this crazy thing that's happening, which is the setup for the horror thing, that there's this, I guess, a demon or a ghost, or they don't never really tell you, but some thing that once it gets locked onto you, it will follow you and kill you. When it gets you, I guess it kills you in a pretty brutal way. And the only way for you to get it off of you is you basically have to have sex with somebody. And it's almost like someone said it was like a spiritual venereal disease. You have to pass it to somebody else. And then once you do that, you're in the clear, but now this person is the target and they have to try to get it off of them. But anyway, because this thing and this whatever this thing is can take many forms. You never know who it could be. An old lady, it could be a kid, it could be a grown man, or it could be takes any different forms. But anyway, there's a scene where they're in the park. She's trying to explain to them how this thing works and what's going on, and the camera is slowly panning in a circle around as people are talking. But you start noticing in the background, there's people playing frisbee, people with their dogs, people. But there's one character, there's one person way in the distance who is slowly walking towards the group. And he's getting closer and closer and closer. And the camera just keeps spinning. And every time it comes back around over that person's shoulder, there's that person, and they're getting closer and closer and closer. And I won't spoil it, but it's like that kind of thing happens throughout the film where some random person could just be walking towards you and you don't know, is that it? Or is it just some random person? Do I run? Do I kill this person? Or do I wait to see what happens? But if I wait and it is this thing, I'm dead. So I liked that part of it. I liked the way it handled sort of the paranoia part of it. Again, I think there's problems with the story and all that stuff. I don't think it's perfect, but it's one of those things, one of those rare kind of things where I've read reviews of this film and I've talked to people who've seen the film, and this didn't happen to me, but I can see how it would happen to somebody. They watch the film and then afterwards, like the next day, they'd be out somewhere and they'd see someone walking towards them and they would suddenly get terrified. Like, in other words,
Really?
yeah. So this kind of thing, like it gets stuck in their head and it carried over into the real world where like they were so creeped out by it that just the fact that there was some stranger walking towards them on the sidewalk or in the mall, they were like, oh crap. But look, all that stuff's irrational, right? When you're a kid, like, okay, when I was a kid, what scared me more than anything, honestly, was like we would watch documentaries or watch, TV shows about alien abductions. And that's what scared me more than anything. Honestly, I could watch scary movies and they didn't really bother me. But I remember watching like something about alien abductions at late at night, and my mom and dad go, okay, time for bed. And I go take a shower. I'm in the shower, like on edge, like, is a freaking alien going to come get me? I'm laying in my bed, like looking out the window, like crap, aliens are going to come in my room and get me. And it's irrational. Obviously, just because I watched that doesn't mean now it's going to happen to me, but it's an irrational fear, right? Once you have that fear, it doesn't make sense that, well, that's just because it's a movie, that's not going to happen to you. It doesn't matter. I feel like it is because it scared me and I'm still in that state of being scared, right? So I guess, a lot of people who that movie really did scare them, they said, for days afterwards, they were getting creeped out by just random people walking towards them.
I was just terrified by the fact that I wasted 2 hours of my life watching it that I'd never get back. And there was no way I could get those 2 hours back.
That's horrifying. That's terrifying.
Because, you're 2 hours closer to the grave. Life is such a brutal zero-sum game, that
right.
was 2 hours I could have been doing other things, right?
That's right.
But I actually have a really cool story about that movie, which I can tell on another episode.
Okay.
And also about the movie The Lodge. We have to do that.
Yes.
Because that's a movie that I really want to talk about, and it also illustrates the problems with horror in general.
Okay, well, let's do that. We can even do a follow-up episode where we critique bad horror films.
Yeah. Okay. And also, before we get back to my list, if you're talking about Alien, I have a challenge, and the challenge is you, or anybody who thinks they like the movie Alien, has to watch a movie by Mario Bava called Planet of the Vampires.
So can you say that again? Because your audio was distorting a little bit.
Sure. Anyone who thinks Alien is a good movie, watch Planet of the Vampires by Mario Bava. Okay, that's your homework. So basically, what if I said Alien was a ripoff of this other movie by a great horror director from Italy? In Planet of the Vampires, astronauts go to a planet covered in mist. They discover a crashed alien spacecraft with skeletons of giant aliens on it. They unleash a monster that infects and kills the crew. And Ridley Scott has said when he made Alien, he hadn't heard of Mario Bava, which is a lie. Total scam. And the screenplay for Alien was written by Dan O'Bannon.
Yes.
Right. And his original screenplay is good, but not great. And then after he sold his screenplay, the screenplay was rewritten by the king, the awesome, super genius, Walter Hill.
Well, can I tell you something else about that script?
Yeah.
Dan O'Bannon's script for Alien was only very slightly adapted from his first film, directed by John Carpenter, which was John Carpenter's first film. And it's actually a movie I love called Dark Star, which is a comedy, but it's the same story, except that Dark Star is played as a comedy. And then when Dan O'Bannon, I guess Ridley Scott came to him and wanted him to write a script for this movie, he didn't have any ideas. Yeah. And he was like, oh, I've got my Dark Star script. I'll just take that and tweak it a little bit. And that's how he wrote the script for Alien.
Yeah. And I think Dan O'Bannon later made a movie with James Caan called Alienation. I think
did he do that? I don't know. I love Dan O'Bannon as a writer. He worked on the never produced Jodorowsky Dune film. In fact, a whole bunch of people. That's the other thing. A whole bunch of people that were working on Jodorowsky's Dune got cobbled after that got canceled, and they ended up working on Alien. So actually, had there never been Jodorowsky's Dune, there would never have been Alien. Geiger was designing on Dune. Mobius designed on Dune. Yeah. They both came over, designed spaceships and creatures. Like Geiger designed the creature. O'Bannon
Mobius designed the suits.
Sorry.
And Mobius designed the space suits.
Mobius designed the helmets and the spacesuits. Yeah. Dan O'Bannon was writing the scripts for Jodorowsky, and then he ends up on Alien, all that stuff. So what was my point? Oh, Dan O'Bannon. Oh, real quick on Dan O'Bannon too. My favorite Dan O'Bannon anything is an heavy metal magazine, short story called The Long Tomorrow, with art by Mobius. And it is awesome. And in fact, that story, that two-part comic story in Heavy Metal Magazine, written by Dan O'Bannon, illustrated by Mobius, called The Long Tomorrow, was the inspiration for Blade Runner, for the film Blade Runner for Ridley Scott. He loved Mobius. He loved that story. And he wanted to incorporate elements of like the city, how huge it is, and the old parts of it and all that stuff. So the flying cars, he took a lot of his ideas design-wise for the city and the story for Blade Runner from Dan O'Bannon's and Mobius Long Tomorrow comic.
Yeah, I had that book signed by Mobius with a drawing by Mobius on the front of it.
What do you mean you had?
Yeah, I sold it. I had a seizure and couldn't work.
Oh my gosh, dude! I would have bought it from you. If you have anything else like that, let me know. I'll help you out.
Okay. Yeah. And one thing about you can say about Blade Runner is that if you show that movie to someone today, it doesn't look like a movie made 40 years ago.
No, it doesn't. That's what I say about Alien too. The first Alien, that movie does not age. It looks like it was made yesterday. It's so well done.
Right. Yeah. So, like I was saying, this in the script for Alien that Dan O'Bannon had, Ripley was not a female.
Right.
It wasn't like the magic wasn't there. And then Walter Hill has a producer credit on every Alien movie ever made, and he totally wrote the screenplay for Alien, but ended up not getting a credit for it. And basically, Walter Hill, the first movie that Sam Peckinpah made that was actually a box office hit was written by Walter Hill, called the Getaway, with Steve McQueen and Ali MacGraw.
Oh, cool! Yeah.
Yeah,
Love it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then because of that success, Walter Hill was allowed to become a director. Then he made the movie Hard Times with Charles Bronson. And then he made The Warriors,
Oh yeah. Oh
which you've
gosh.
seen,
Classic film.
right?
Yeah.
Right. Then he made The Long Riders, which was a
Oh,
movie about
yes.
Jesse James, where
Yes.
all the brothers were played by brothers,
Yes. The Carradine
like
brothers and the
James
Keach.
Keach, Stacy Keach.
I really like that movie. You know what? It's not great, but there are some great scenes in that movie. I
Actually,
really like it. I think it's a good movie.
actually, it's pretty close to great.
I would say that. I would say it's close to great.
Oh, he also made a movie called Southern Comfort,
Oh gosh, now
which
that movie I liked.
it's what's the word? It's perfect. Yeah, that's the word. Perfect.
I
Then he
do
made
like that movie. I love that
yeah.
movie.
Then he made 48 Hours
Yes,
with Eddie Murphy.
that's
He made a
good.
great movie. Yeah, and he made a great movie called Trespass with Ice-T and Ice Cube.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
It's great. He was the director on the TV show Deadwood.
Oh yeah,
Um, yeah, and he's so great. And yeah, so the reason Alien is so good is because they ripped off Planet of the Vampires, and because Walter Hill was there. And it's
that's
kind of
not
funny.
the only reason it's so great. Ridley Scott
Um,
is a great director and took what he had, the script and the idea, and with come on, without him, with a bad director, a different director, it wouldn't have been as good.
I, I don't know. Like he's had a lot of luck with like when he has a good script. I don't know. I don't know.
He's made plenty of bad movies. I'm not a Ridley Scott like apologist or anything. I think he's really only made a handful of great films, but Alien and Blade Runner, I would say, which is funny because like those are like pretty some of his earlier films. I think he's kind of he lost it for a while, and I think he's only recently started to get it back. The Martian was not bad, and I was like, oh, good. He's proven he can still make a decent movie. And I haven't seen the last Duel, which just came out, but I've heard it's also very, very good. But yeah, I think
Well,
for a long time there he lost his way.
well. First off, he made one good movie before Alien called The Duelist, starring
Oh
Harvey
yeah,
Keitel.
yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you've seen Prometheus and Covenant and all
I
that stuff.
have, but I wish I didn't.
Um,
I don't think those are good films.
um, it's so funny. Like they they make you feel really depressed because you watch the movies and you look at them and go, wow, you spent a lot of money here,
It looks great.
and you know, on paper you're smart people. Like if I gave you an IQ test or something, but this movie is so flaming stupid,
Yeah.
right?
So Prometheus, I almost feel like if it had not been tied at all to the Alien franchise, if it was just a standalone sci-fi film, maybe, maybe I would have liked it more. I think it's because I kept trying to understand how it connected and it doesn't really, and that's frustrating. There's things I like in the film, but in fact, I will say this. Here's the good thing I could say about Prometheus. It has a scene in it, which is one of the only times in a movie theater I have literally squirmed in my seat. It was so, it created so much anxiety for me. It was when she's got this thing, the alien is in her, and she puts herself
Yeah.
in this auto dock thing, right? That encloses her, and she asks it to perform an abortion, and it pulls this alien thing out, and then it's like right there trying to get at her, and she's trying to open the door and the thing to get out. That whole sequence is like, oh gosh, man. I wanted to, I was squirming in my seat so bad. So that was
See,
great. That scene right there was great. But the movie around it is just kind of disappointing.
see, see, that was nothing because by that point I'd already checked out because everything had been so illogical, right?
Right.
See, like how Grant Morrison has that famous quote where he says, "If you're going to read my comic and wonder where Batman gets the gas for the Batmobile. You
Right.
aren't tall enough for this ride. This book isn't for you, right?
Right.
So that's one thing. But at the same time, you can't make a movie like that and go, okay, we're going to an alien planet. Let's take off our gas masks. I think we're cool, right?
Right. And when you
And
have
it's like,
people, you have these experts you set up at the beginning. Oh, I'm the doctor. I'm a virologist. I'm a biologist. And then these people, when they get there, don't know anything and break all the rules of what is somebody
yeah,
who should know better. Oh, look, a strange alien life form. Let me take off my glove and touch it with my
Yeah.
freaking finger. Oh, crap. Now it's in my body. I'm dead. Well, yeah, you deserve that, dummy.
but it's like I've worked in factories where you work in confined spaces, you work with different kinds of gases, and before you can go on site, you have to take these courses for a long time, right?
Yeah, safety
And
courses. Yeah.
and like I remember before COVID, when I went to Africa, you had to have a card showing you'd been vaccinated for these things, right? Like you had to show them like a yellow card, right? But then they go to another planet where they don't know anything, and they say, "Oh wow, let's just take off our masks,"
I know.
right?
It's so stupid.
And on and on and on. And there were so many stupid things, and like the way they get lost inside the thing, like it's Scooby Doo, like that was really sad.
Right. Yeah. It's a
Yeah,
very, very wasted opportunity. It's very disappointing. What could have, all the elements were there. Great cast, great special effects, all that stuff was great, but nope.
Actually, this is what it also points out another reason why I hate the 21st century, because you watch the movie and you're like, my God, like there's one bit where Charlize Theron, she says to the captain, "Meet me in my chambers for sex. We'll have sexual intercourse." You're like, what? The last time these two talked, they weren't friendly at all, right?
Right.
Where's the mating ritual, the seduction, right? And then, oh no, we filmed that scene, but we cut it out. And then there's a bit where like something happens in the movie where it's like, oh wow, this doesn't make any sense. But then if you buy the DVD for your home,
There's a deleted scene. Yeah.
there's a deleted scene where like, hey, dummy, make it right the first time.
Right. Yes.
Right?
If there's something that explains the next thing, you might not want to cut that out. Yeah.
No, it's like, and I don't have to give that a pass because John Huston made some of the best movies ever made in 3 weeks.
Right.
Right? Get
But with
lost.
a lot
right?
less money.
Yeah, it's so crazy. And this whole thing about Easter eggs and like deleted scenes, it's like, shoot me now. That's horrible.
Right. All right. So what else is on your list?
So first, I will ask you how you're doing for time, so I know how fast I've
Well, I think I don't have a stopwatch here, but I think we've been recording for almost let's see, it's an hour and a half, right? I think. Something like that. So yeah, we should
Okay. Well, okay. So
how quickly can you run through your list?
In 20 minutes or less.
Yes, go.
Okay, great. So there's a great movie called The Innocents, which is based on the American classic novella The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. It stars Deborah Kerr, who was a really interesting person. She was a really beautiful, blonde, blue-eyed person, and she had a lot of goody-goody kind of roles. And she didn't want to be typecast, so she took a role in From Here to Eternity with Burt Lancaster, where she played an adulterer, which was her way of showing the world she could do more than just play like nice.
Right.
Then in The Innocents, if you the first thing you notice when you read the book and then see the movie is like, oh wow, she's too old for the part. But once the movie starts working, that is just another element that seems off and strange and makes it work even better.
Right.
So, you probably read it in school. It's basically about a housekeeper who's in charge of these kids. And the castle they live in is haunted, but the ghost is only ever seen by her from her POV.
Yeah.
So the question is it actual haunting or is she a nut?
Is she
Right?
insane? Yeah.
Right. So basically, The Innocents with Deborah Kerr is a great movie. Period. Um, we talked about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's interesting. I just saw the movie recently, and I guess I'd recommend it. It's interesting how it's a horror movie that takes place in the country in very bright light,
Yeah.
where because the cliches of horror are so powerful, you know, the castle and the cobwebs and all this.
The dark. Yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of neat to see a horror movie that's in bright sunlight. So there's a movie called Zombie, Zombi, by Lucio Fulci, and it was made around 1980. And it's a zombie movie that takes place on an island in the Caribbean. So you have a scary movie about zombies that takes place in the bright Caribbean sun. And I think it's my favorite movie by Lucio Fulci. And it features a battle between a zombie and a shark, an
Oh,
actual wrestling match between a zombie and a shark.
well, there you sold me. You had me at zombie versus shark.
Yeah, it's pretty darn great. Another movie that has to be close to the top of the list is a movie called The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Yeah. You're hitting all the classics, man.
Yeah. Caligari is, you know, it has this framing sequence where you find out, oh, the whole movie you've seen is just a tale told by a nut in an asylum. It has a classic framing sequence,
Right.
which decades later became cliche,
Yes.
but great story, great looks, and it's kind of funny how it was the first movie to actually use the background surrounding the people as a way to mirror or exaggerate or talk about their interior mental state.
Cool.
And of course, once the Nazis took power in Germany, at that time their film business was way more advanced than America's, and America really benefited from, you know, the Nazis taking over because all these German geniuses like uh, uh, Karl Freund, who directed The Mummy,
Oh yeah.
Fritz Lang, who made Metropolis and
Yes.
M. They all went to Hollywood and brought the look of Caligari and combined the look of Caligari with the hard-boiled world of Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler to make film noir.
Yes.
So Caligari is really good. One of my all-time favorite horror movies and favorite movies is called The Exorcist Part 3.
Not part one.
Not Part 1, Part 3. William Peter Blatty directed it himself from a novel he wrote himself, and the finished version was kind of butchered, but still, he really poured his heart and soul into it. It has a lot of great stuff and a great performance from George C. Scott. There's a bit where before the exorcism, they show you Father Morning's apartment, and he has a sign on his wall that says, "What you give to the poor when you are alive is all you take with you when you die,"
Yeah. Wow.
which was a line that Bill had in The Exorcist, and it was important to him. So he finally got that on the wall in The Exorcist Part 3.
Wow. Because it didn't make it into the actual film.
Yeah, so that's something worth thinking about.
Yeah.
And 10 years before Exorcist Part 3, George C. Scott also starred in one of the greatest movies ever made in Canada called The Changeling,
Wow.
where George C. Scott is, his wife dies, he moves into a house, finds out the house is haunted, and it's kind of funny. Like, you know how normally if you find a house is haunted that you're living in, you're scared, the ghost hassles you, right?
Right.
But George C. Scott, he's not afraid of no ghost, right? Because George C. Scott has these huge balls, right? So, you know, so basically, he moved into a haunted house, and instead of being afraid of the ghost, he works on breaking down the language barrier and figuring out what the ghost wants.
So he makes friends with the ghost. He communicates with the ghost.
Yeah, and it turns into a really good mystery. And there's a great bit in the movie where there's a red bouncing ball, right? That's always bouncing around, trying to get George C. Scott's attention, right? So then George C. Scott takes his rubber ball, gets in the station wagon, drives 40 miles, throws it in this frozen river, right? And then drives home 40 miles, unlocks his front door, and there's this beautiful shot of the staircase, and the upper part of the staircase is pitch black. And then out of this blackness, the red ball comes bouncing down.
Oh, that's
and
great.
goes right to his feet, right?
That's great.
And it's a great movie, right?
Wow,
probably
no, I've
the
never
best
seen that one. Never seen
It's
it.
so great, right? And it's so great, probably the best non-Cronenberg movie ever made in Canada. So you watch the scene with the red bouncing ball, and it's masterfully done, really scary. You're
Yeah,
scared, right? And then the
right,
ball stops at his feet, right? And then because it's George C. Scott, you know how they get another movie, they'd be screaming, running in terror.
right. He
George
just
C.
has a look.
Scott looks at this haunted red ball, looks up at the satanic, gloomy darkness, and he says, "You goddamn son of a bitch! What do you want? What do you want?" Right?
That sounds like George
Because
C.
he's George
Scott.
C. Scott, right? And he has
Yes.
these giant balls, right? So then he finds out what the ghost wants, and it's actually a really kick-ass mystery.
Well, don't spoil it.
Yeah, actually, I won't. But The Changeling is just a great movie.
That sounds great. I may have to watch
Yeah.
that. That sounds really good. I've never seen it.
Yeah, I think that's a really great one. Let the Right One In is a vampire movie.
The original one, right? Not the remake.
Right.
Yeah,
And
I would agree.
it's got a
No, I
really-
forgot. I've seen that one. I forgot about it. Actually, that one is pretty good.
yeah, and it's got a really scary ending where you realize that this woman, this vampire, has been pulling this trick with dudes for
Oh,
centuries.
forever. Yes.
It's brutal,
Yeah,
It's
it's really
brutal.
good.
right? And it's got some really good scary bits, but the very last scene where he's on the train with the suitcase and you actually put it together,
Yes.
that's really scary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, this is kind of funny. Someday we'll do an episode about the problems of horror. Nicole Kidman made a movie called The Others.
Yeah, I've never seen that one.
You know, it's funny. I had a colleague who gave me this movie on a blank disc, right? So I knew nothing about it, and I put it in my DVD player, knowing nothing about it. And the people say the spoiler alert thing, and normally I don't care, but I'm watching this movie thinking I'm liking it. It's great. And then these weird things pile up, and I'm thinking, okay, how can they all tie this together in a way that doesn't feel like a ripoff,
And they didn't?
which always happens in
Yeah.
horror, right?
Yeah.
And then at the end of the movie, guess what? They did it. It worked.
Oh, really? All right. So no, I think
Yeah.
I have heard good things about that film as well. So yeah, maybe I'll put that on my list too.
Yeah. The Others is really good. And we mentioned Bride of Frankenstein earlier. The Bride of Frankenstein, Elsa Lanchester, was married to a man who directed one of the greatest horror movies ever. His name was Charles Lawton, and the movie is called Night of the Hunter.
Okay.
And the screenplay is by James Agee, and it stars Robert Mitchum playing a traveling evangelist who marries widows and then kills them for their money.
Okay.
And it's a great movie. You've probably heard about it. Another great movie is called The Wicker Man with Christopher Lee.
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
Okay. basically Edward Woodward, who would later play the starring role in a TV show called The Equalizer
Yes.
in the 80s. Right, him. He's a detective who is sent to an island in North England, around Scotland, to investigate a missing persons case, and finds out that this island is pretty weird. So I would totally recommend The Wicker Man.
Okay.
And
I'm curious about your tie for first place.
well, it's kind of funny. I was just about to mention that. So I guess
Okay, good. Look at that. We're on the right. We're on the same page.
So I guess we're on track. So my list of horror movies is Onibaba, The Brood, the 3 movies by James Whale, Dracula, Wolfman, Innocence, Zombie, Caligari, Exorcist 3, Changeling, Let the Right One In, The Others, Wicker Man, and a tie for first place. The first movie in the tie is a movie called The Tenet by Roman Polanski. And it's based on a very short novel by Roland Topper, who was a novelist, cartoonist, fine artist, really interesting guy. Did a lot of really disturbing cartoons. And in the movie The Tenant, Roman Polanski co-wrote the screenplay, directed it, and stars in it. And basically, he's a guy looking for a cheap apartment, and he moves into an apartment, and the previous occupant of the apartment is a woman who committed suicide, and slowly throughout the course of the movie encourages Polanski's character to commit suicide the same way. And it's directed by the cinematography is by Sven Nykvist, who was the great cinematographer who lit all of Ingmar Bergman's movies.
Oh wow!
He was also the cinematographer on Tarkovsky's Sacrifice.
Horrible film. Looks great.
Yeah.
I love Tarkovsky, but that's my least favorite Tarkovsky film.
Yeah, I have to say, Solaris isn't really cutting the mustard for me either, but hey.
Well, I read the book, and so I guess maybe that's why I enjoyed it. I really loved it. I love the concept of the film.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, don't want to derail us.
Yeah, it's funny. Someday we'll talk about Michelangelo Antonioni as well, and the criticism that people have about Tarkovsky, like slow, cut, right? People have that about Antonioni, which I don't get. I just think, man, it's great, bring it on, right?
Yeah.
So the movie that the Tenet, it's actually got a good mix of humor and horror, which Polanski had earlier done. Roman Polanski made a movie called The Fearless Vampire Killers, which is a vampire movie which looks beautiful and has bits that are funny and also bits that are scary. And The Tenet is just a great movie.
Yeah.
And tied for number 1, possibly the number 1, is a movie called Don't Look Now, directed by Nicholas Roeg, starring Donald Sutherland, based on a short story by Daphne du Maurier. Daphne du Maurier wrote a story called Rebecca, which was made into a movie by Hitchcock. She wrote a short story called The Birds, made into a movie by Hitchcock.
Yeah.
And she wrote this short story, made into a movie by Nicholas Roeg. So she's doing pretty good there. And basically, in Don't Look Now, it's a story about what if you were a psychic, but didn't believe psychics existed, so you didn't trust what you were seeing, so you got tripped up.
Yeah.
And Don't Look Now is a movie about psychic powers, but it's also a movie about grief, and it's also about marriage and how marriage goes through different chapters as you go through life together. And it's also about time, which was something Nicholas Roeg was always really interested in, making movies that were told out of sequence.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Before Tarantino.
Yeah. Also before Watchmen, where Don't Look Now is Alan Moore's favorite movie.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. Like a big part of what interested Alan Moore about Watchmen wasn't superheroes, because Alan Moore hates superheroes and thinks superhero movies are cultural catastrophe.
Yeah.
And he wrote Watchmen hoping it would be the epitaph for the superhero.
Oh,
And
no.
yeah.
No.
Well, I mean,
He was so wrong.
it's kind of, pardon me?
He was so very wrong.
Well, that's called the law of unintended consequences.
Right.
Like, you know how Martin Luther, when people started calling themselves Lutherans, he was so upset.
Yes.
And he said, "Good Lord, Luther didn't die for your sins. Don't do that." But it was too late.
Yeah,
right?
I would agree with him. I would also say the same of Calvinists. You might not want to be. I never understood, as an aside, like, why would you say, when you're talking about religious belief, if your choices are, I could tell people that I'm the follower of the Son of God who was incarnated into the body of a man, I'm going to follow this person, or I'm going to follow a lawyer born in the 1500s, I'm a Calvinist. Like, why would you, I don't get how you identify your religious beliefs with a guy, just a guy who had some beliefs and some ideas. Like, why? I don't get it. I would rather say I'm a Christian. I follow Jesus. I follow Jesus. I don't follow Luther or Calvin or Anselm or Augustine or any of these guys. Like, they could be great guys, smart guys, but I'm not a Calvinist. You know what I mean? Never understood that.
Well, we should probably try to figure this out.
Yeah.
I think it's because I think it gets back to people wanting certainty, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And the thing about Jesus is he's baffling, and people don't like him. Right?
That's why they prefer Paul instead of as opposed to Jesus, because Paul's all about doctrine, and we can argue about that. We can talk about predestination, and we can talk about all these other things, because Paul gives us sort of theological terminology we can debate. But Jesus just says things like, love God, love your neighbors yourself, care for the poor, visit people in prison. Those are not theological things we can debate. You know what I mean? Those are things we're supposed to do, and it's kind of uncomfortable.
Well, also, funny you should mention this. I was just talking to a gentleman yesterday who was talking about how 5G is the precursor to the Antichrist. Right?
Oh, of course. Yes.
Right.
Sure it is.
And it'll be called 6G, and 6G will be.
Oh, 666. Oh, I got it.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
It's all coming together.
So it's funny. Like, as soon as it happens, my boredom just because what I don't get is, like, okay, let's say you're right. Right. Let's say you're right, and 6 years from today, we're all dead or we're all in a gulag, right? Jesus said, love your neighbor, right? Does the 666 thing negate that, or is that still job one today? Right. Like, how can you help me? Like, I don't love my neighbor, right? How can you help me with that project today?
Right.
But like, you can't. All you can tell me is about, this doom and gloom down the road, right?
Yeah.
So so that's just a drag, and it's funny. Like, sometimes I'd be hearing the stuff that you talk about, right, in your books, and I'd be going, wow, I'm not too interested in this. And then once in a while I'd be reminded, and I'm going, oh wow, the stuff you're talking about causes actual real world harm.
Yes. That's why I'm trying to put a spotlight on things that I know are hurting people and twisting people up. Yeah, I want to shine a light on that and expose that and say, this is bullshit. Don't believe this.
Yeah, like it's cruel.
Mm,
It's crass. It reduces people to pawns on the grand chessboard
yeah,
of the 6G, right? So it's a problem. But
yeah,
anyhow, as we were saying, whenever you try to do something, there's a law of unintended consequences to smack you down and make you look like a fool, right?
right.
So and that's what happened to Martin Luther.
Yeah,
He's like, no, 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 put the genie back in the bottle. That's enough, right? I didn't want this much reformation. I just wanted this much,
right.
right? And then Alan Moore said, said superheroes are creepy, they're ugly, they're fascist, they're evil, they're a disaster. I'm going to write a book showing about how they suck. Well, my job here is done.
That'll explain why we should be done with that. Yes.
And then unfortunately, all of these comic book guy people, like the guy in The Simpsons, who should have grown out of this stuff,
Yeah.
instead look at Watchmen and say, oh, wow, this guy gave an intellectual veneer to my Arrested Development. Thanks,
Right.
Al. This is great, right? Look,
Yeah.
comics aren't for kids anymore and all this nonsense.
Yeah.
But what Alan Moore found interesting about Watchmen was Dr. Manhattan being out of time, like in the Kurt Vonnegut book,
Yes.
where what if he didn't see time as a trolley on a track,
Right.
but more like as a diamond or a prism?
Yes.
So that was what Alan Moore was interested in. That's what really got him fired up. And that's all from Nick Rogue, who made a big thing about fracturing the chronology of his narratives in a really interesting way to talk about how we process.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, this has been typically very exciting and interesting. And I know we chased some rabbits there, but I'm sure if people have listened 14 episodes, they're used to this. This is what we do. This is how we make the sausage, ladies and gentlemen. So this has been great. Enjoyed it. Hopefully people have gotten some ideas for some good horror films that they could watch. If they haven't seen some of these, check them out. You've given me some things to look up too. So this has been really fun, man. And maybe we'll do a follow-up down the road where we'll do like horror films we hate or things like that. That'd be a good episode as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everyone. See you next time.